This morning's gospel reading is taken from Mark, chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. And if you'd like to join along in the reading, you may follow so on pages 12, 21 in the Pew Bible in front of you. Jesus is alive. After Sabbath, Mary Magdalene, Salome, and Mary, the mother of James, brought some spices to put on Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just as the sun was coming up, they went to the tomb. On their way, they were asking one another, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance for us?" But when they looked, they saw that the stone already had rolled away, and it was a huge stone. The women went into the tomb, and on the right side, they saw a young man in white robes sitting there. They were alarmed. The man said, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was nailed to the cross. God has raised him to life, and he isn't here. You can see the place where they put his body. Now, go and tell his disciples, and especially Peter, that he will go ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you." When the women ran from the tomb, they were confused, shaking all over. They were too afraid to tell anyone what had happened.
This is my 21st Easter at Arcadia Congregational United Church of Christ.
Amen.
And how many times can you say he's risen? And everybody else replies, he's risen indeed. And I don't want this to be old, because this should be fresh in our hearts and minds. In our gospel reading from Mark today, it was very abbreviated, wasn't it? And a lot of people don't realize that they're very different authors. Mark is our shortest gospel. It was written at the earliest date. So if they put the gospels in the Bible, they should have had Mark, Matthew, and Luke around the same time, and then John at a much later date. And so Mark doesn't have much to say. And in the Gospel of Mark, it says that the three women were there, and they were too afraid. Well, later on, it does tell them they shared the good news. But can you imagine yourself having a real beloved person in your life? Even if they did tell you in advance, "Don't worry, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to rise." And you go, okay. Hard to believe. And then can you imagine going there with the stone being rolled away and finding that the body's gone? I think the first thing I would think of is that somebody stole the body. Is that what most of us would think? You know? But the thing is, I find it unfortunate that so often the emphasis is put on that he lived, and then everything is over after that. I want to share with you a person who's really meant a lot to me. He just died last year. His name was Marcus Borg. Anybody ever hear of him? I know Julio has.
Yeah. Marcus
Borg was a professor of religious studies at Oregon State University. And he grew up, I think it was in Iowa, like a lot of other people, went to church, went to Sunday school, took his confirmation classes, and was taught about Jesus and the miracles and how he was lifted from death. And this is wonderful. And we should always pray for Jesus and put him in our hearts. And not too much emphasis on what it was that he said and did. Oh yeah, the miracles and the healings. But what about the tough words that he expressed? And Marcus Borg was just kind of interested in comparative religion. So he went to college and he took religious studies and he studied all the other major religious traditions. And he was forced in his early Christianity class to read the Gospels seriously and then take a test on it. That doesn't sound like too much fun, does it? And then he read them. And then he met Jesus again. but for the first time. He really didn't know that much about him. He didn't know about what he said and what he really did. He said some really pretty harsh things, didn't he? Especially when people would judge him and the company he kept. In fact, those were the only people that Jesus really criticized, were those that were kind of uppity and said, well, if you're supposed to be a prophet and a teacher, don't you know who you're hanging around with? This person did this sin, and this person did that sin. You should be ashamed of yourself. And he was the one who said, you know, if you're well, you don't need the services of a physician, do you? So Marcus Borg, for really the first time in his life, even though he had gone to Sunday school and attended church and everything, read the Gospels and discovered someone that was so important in his life, someone who had said something that he honestly believed, and I do too, that if we really took his words and modeled seriously, there would be no hatred in the world. You know, people pray for peace. If you actually acted like him and thought like him, there would be peace in the world. Because, according to Marcus Borg, it finally hit him. Jesus said that all of us sin, and that we need to be realizing that and not judging other people. Because when we see that little speck in their eye, there's a big old log in our eye. And Marcus Borg read this and thought, wow, what if we all practice this? What if we seriously said, I'm going to look to myself first and be a little more self-examining. And instead of condemning everybody and pointing out everything that they do wrong, why don't I start at home first and explore my own self? Can you believe how he taught us how to forgive? I think forgiveness is probably the most difficult thing we can do in our lives. Is there anybody here who can honestly say they've never been wronged by anybody? Got real quiet, didn't it? No one's jumping up and go, oh no, everybody's been always nice to me. Especially my family members, right? They never get on my nerves. They're always kind and say sweet words, right? Who gets on your nerves the most?
Your family.
People that live close to you. And the closer, the more they can really, yes, really get to you. So what I'm trying to say on this day, because we have a lot of things to do, is after reading Marcus Borg, that's what really encouraged me to seriously read the Gospels. And if we can learn anything on this day or other days in our lives, is one, truly love people, even if they're not the nicest people in the world and don't always treat us fairly. If we can extend that love, it makes a huge difference. And two, when they do things that are really unkind, learn how to forgive them. Because we've probably done unkind things ourselves. And three, Jesus really didn't condemn people. Look at all the condemnation we hear in the world about various groups of people, or this person has this disorder, or this person doesn't practice the way I would live my life. Jesus never condemned anybody, did he? He didn't. I want to leave you with the story of the woman who came into the house of a Pharisee. Those were those ultra-Orthodox types. And Jesus was there, and she came in, and the owner of the home didn't offer to, put his feet in any kind of water. And back in those days, they wore sandals, and you can imagine how dusty it would be from the road. And she came there, and she bathed his feet, and she washed, and she dried his hair, she dried his feet with her hair, and she anointed him with a balm that was very, very expensive. and the owner of the house. Judgmental as all get out. Do you know what kind of a woman that is? She has quite a reputation. And what does Jesus do? Lifts her up. When I came in, you didn't do anything to show me hospitality. But she has shown me the most wonderful hospitality and has put on a balm, which was normally used when a person died to preserve the skin. She showed him love and compassion. If we can do that, if we can truly follow Jesus, not just say, oh, Jesus lives and he saves and now I can go out and sin again and do all kinds of nasty things to other people. But if we take him seriously, if we internalize what it was that he said, we truly will make a difference in the world. Believe it or not, there's going to be a lot more world peace. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.